What's up? I'm Angie, and you are listening to Podcast That Pays, the podcast for online business owners who want to grow their business and sell their offers using podcasting. If you like no fluff, tell it like it is advice from a marketing-loving podcast agency owner, you are in the right place. So glad you're here. Let's dive in. So I've been in business for 4 years, I think, in this current business. And I'm here to tell you that half of my revenue has come directly from podcasts. Probably more than half at this point has come directly from podcasting. So others are come from the ways I do Facebook ads, I do all kinds of other things, but a big chunk majority have come from doing my podcast, right? And so people ask me all the time, like, Angie, how do you make money from podcasts? Or I'm not making any money. I don't convert. I don't understand. Like, I'm not getting anybody to my podcast. I'm not selling from my podcast. I feel like I'm talking into the void. Well, I am here to tell you today how you can start selling and converting from your podcast. So, number one, if you haven't listened to the previous 2 episodes about positioning and content, then you need to go listen to those episodes before this one, because one of the major elements of being able to make money with your podcast has to do with having the right positioning, and it has to do with being able to create content that people are wanting, that positions you as the expert, and creating content that moves people through a customer journey or moves people through so that they are ready to buy from you right from your podcast. So I know that you've heard lots of different things, or maybe you've experienced lots of different things with your podcast, and it is sort of a misconception or myth, or maybe it's not a myth, maybe it's true for a lot of people, that you can't sell from your podcast. Or, I've heard everything like you can't sell high ticket. People assume that you come to a podcast and you have to sell low ticket or give away a freebie or get people into your funnel in order to make money, or that it takes a really long time before you can make money with your podcast. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true. That's literally not true. I just had a client who went through one of my programs, launch her podcast, and she was able to, from her first, I don't even think her podcast has been out a month yet. Her first season, first few episodes, she's closed one of her highest ticket clients. Like, she bought the highest package. So I'm here to tell you that you can do that. Like, and her person who bought the highest package covered what she paid for me to help her get her podcast going and produce that. So she got her ROI on working with me in less than a month back from when she actually launched her podcast, right? So it is possible. I had someone come to me once and they were like, we're mapping out her podcast, and she was just like, well, but when we got to the section about, selling and what you're going to do and where we're going to lead people, and she was like, well, I just assumed that you don't like sell people from your podcast, or you can't sell from your podcast. So like, we'll lead them over to an email list. And I was like, like, if that is what you assume, that is what will happen. Like, that is what will happen every time. You won't sell anything from your podcast if you're not actively selling. Or I'll have people who come to me who are like, help me make money from my podcast. Like, how can I make money from my podcast? And then I ask them, well, are you selling on your podcast? Are you asking for a sell? And a lot of the times the answer is no. Or a lot of the times they'll tell me that, like, in their outro, they'll bury a CTA in their outro. And that is why you're not selling on your podcast. So a lot of these things, and a lot of the reason why you're not selling on your podcast is because we've been conditioned to think that this doesn't work on our podcast, or we've been conditioned to think that we only use this as a lead magnet, or we've been conditioned to think that the only way that you can make money from a podcast is from getting sponsorships. The quickest path to cash in a podcast is to sell your own shit. The quickest path to cash from a podcast is to sell your own shit. You are going to make more money from the beginning in the shorter term not long term. The shorter term, you are more likely to get a return on investment of what you're doing with your podcast quicker when you show up and sell what you have to offer and not be afraid to have CTAs and not be afraid to move people through to the next step. Okay. So I just want to say that it doesn't have to be the long game. You don't have to sell just low ticket. You don't need to sell somebody to a webinar from your podcast. If we think about the nature of what a podcast is, it is a webinar. It is a masterclass. It is the free thing. So why are we sending people from the free thing to the free thing? It's not necessary. We're sending people from, and this is where I want you to think about the nature of how this platform is, how people consume your content. People are consuming this content, has the highest consumption rate of any platform. So that means 86% is like the average consumption rate of podcasts. 86%. That means every person who lands on your podcast episode, so you listening right now, on average, you'll listen to 86% of this episode. That's huge. The next highest is YouTube at 50%. Like, it's huge, 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 huge. So people are actually listening and consuming. However, what people are also doing, people are also riding their bike, walking their dog. I used to tell everybody I was picking up dog shit while I listened to podcasts. So people are listening because of the accessibility of it, but they're also doing other things. So you have to understand how to tailor your content, which I talked about in the previous episode, to the platform that you're on. And we have to understand that because people are listening, because people are really engaged, because audio is so powerful. I have a client who's a freaking hypnotherapist, and she's talking about how literally powerful audio is and getting into people's psyche. And like every word that she writes in her podcast, like every word that she says in her podcast is like carefully scripted because she wants to be so careful what she's putting into people's psyche. And I'm like, shit, that's really powerful. Like, teach me how to do some subliminal messages. Like, teach me how to put some shit in people's psyche. But like, honestly, it just blew my mind, and not blew my mind, but it just solidified the fact that people who are listening to podcasts are like so engaged. People who are listening to podcasts are soaking up what you have to say. They feel more intimate and connected to you. And I say this all the time, the warmest leads that you are going to have in your business are going to come from your podcast. The warmest leads. So you should be selling, and you should be selling what it is that you really want to sell. Hey, if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, I really need to up my podcasting game, or you want to start utilizing your show more for your business to get more leads and sell more offers, then I want you to come over to podcastthatpays.com and check out the Podcast Collab Lab. That's podcastthatpays.com, and check out what we're doing over there. I would love you to join us. Okay, back to the show. And if I have one more person that comes up to me or one of my clients that says to me, I'm just going to get them on the email list. And I say, well, what do you do with your email and how often do you do it? And they say, I don't know. I don't really email my list. Why in the world are we getting people onto email lists that we don't email? Why in the world would we do that? Why in the world would we take someone from a super hot platform, from somewhere where they're super engaged, to a place where it's crickets and it's a desert wasteland? And I'm not saying you can't put people on your list, but what I'm saying is, let's think about this logically. What is this journey? They're coming here. They're super engaged. They want to be in our space. They're super excited about what we're saying. And what comes next for them? What comes next for them? And so I want to talk about, and this will lead me into the very first thing that you need to think about when you're wanting to sell from your podcast, which is, what comes next for them? What is the right offer to put in front of these people who are on your podcast? And this is going to be so specific to your business, to you, to your people. You have to have your finger on the pulse of what your people are wanting, what you're wanting in your business, the type of thing that you're selling. Some people do require a little bit more. Some people might need more touch points. Some people might need you to have some FaceTime. They might need to have some FaceTime with you. It depends on what you're selling and what you're doing. It doesn't mean if you're selling high ticket, you have to have lots more touch points. It just means that you have to really be listening and understand your audience. You need to understand your audience and what they need. So what do we put? What comes logically next? On a call today, and I'll give you an example. I was helping one of my, a person that was in one of my workshops talk about, like, she was talking about her podcast, and she's a doula. And we were going over this very thing. What comes next for your people? And she was talking about the difference in content. And she feels like if she's teaching people how to do things in her content, why are they going to want to take the next step? And that's another conversation in general about, teaching, because I don't believe in gatekeeping, but I believe in, again, understanding what platform that you are on. I believe in understanding that, like, these people are out picking up dog shit. Like, this is not workshop time. This is not time we're even looking at anything. Like, this is not time to, like, absorb all of this. This is time to change people's minds. This episode is intended to change your mind about how you look at selling on your podcast. This might not, like, teach you everything. I'm going to naturally give you some pointers, but, like, this is designed to change your mind for you to see. I'm telling you about my client who had success in her first season of her launch. I had success in my first season. So I got my very first client from my podcast when I had my first podcast for my life coaching business. First client binged my podcast. And that's how I got her. So I want you to see that. So I was talking to her, and we were trying to figure out what to put next for those people. And we were just talking about, like, how what we need to do in her podcast is really, in her content, is change people's mind. We need to, like, bust down these myths about, birth and what happens, and talk about these issues, like, culturally and socially, like, what's affecting women, and like people's birthing plans, like different things like that, right? And then what we can do is, like, when we're talking about all these issues, now let's lead them and say, hey, now let's create your own customized birthing plan. Because what we're doing is we're basically giving you the freedom and saying, hey, you can do this however you want. Here's the misconceptions. Here's what's possible for you. And bam, let's go create your own birthing plan. And I'm not sure if she's doing it paid or not, or if she's getting on a call, which is what I recommend. I'm like, get on a call and say, hey, let's do a 30-minute birthing plan, strategy dump or something. Right. So then that way we get people on the call, we get to find out what they want even more. And it seemed like such a natural evolution, such a natural next step of the journey. So what I want you to think about is, what is the natural next step for your people? What would feel like a natural next step? For me, I'm selling into my membership. I feel like that's a good next step. Like, you're here, you're consuming my content. You want to get more, you want to get access to my course, you want to dip your toe in a little deeper, go into my membership. Now, I've sold my course. I've sold a course, $1,500 directly from my podcast. I've sold into production, which is $5,000 packages directly from my podcast. Like, I've sold other things. And right now I want to sell my membership because it's part of my goal, right? So it's like, that's the thing I want to do. That's the thing I want to focus on. I want to get people into community, and that's what I'm doing. So don't forget, it's about what you really want to sell and your goal. And it's about, like, what feels right. It's about the combination. What feels right in that customer's journey. It's about both of those things. Okay. So what's next? So after we get to this place of, we understand what's going to happen next, the thing where I want you to back up to the first two episodes is, you have to have great content. You have to have great positioning. Without that, it doesn't matter. Without that, you can CTA, you can put call to actions in, and you can tell people about your program all day. But if your content and positioning are off, then that's not going to work. Let me give you an example. So if you are a podcast coach, if you're teaching people about podcasting, but you decide, you come to your podcast and you're like, you know what, on my podcast, I really just want to talk about all the issues that we go through as business owners. I mean, fair, you can talk about that. But then when you drop your CTA to come to your podcast course, how how effective do you think that's going to be? Sure, you're going to find people who are going to, they'll be part of your audience, but will you have us targeted as an audience of an audience? Will you be able to convert? Your conversions are not going to be as high because your positioning is off. You position yourself as something different than what you're trying to sell them. It's almost like a bait and switch, but not in a bad way. It's just, it doesn't go together. Now, if you're here and you're just like, well, I really want to do, like, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. My goal is to teach you, if you are one who wants to like use your podcast in conjunction with your business and to grow your business and to sell shit, then be here. If you want to use your podcast to lottie-dottie and hobby and like talk about all the hot button issues and hopefully grow it and get sponsors one day, then that's fine. But that's not me. That's not what I'm going to teach you here. So that's fine. There can be opposing views. It just depends on what your goals are. So you have to know what your goals are when you're going into this. If you want to make some money, you should listen up. Okay. Period. So you can disagree all you want, and that's fine, but you have to position yourself. You need to name your show something that the people who are going to end up buying from you will be able to relate to that. You need to create content that's going to shift people's beliefs to them thinking that they can do this and to show them that you are the one that can take them through. That's what you should be doing in your content. So you have to have that. You have to have great content positioning. You have to have a logical next step. What's the logical next step to put in front of people? And then you have to actually ask for the sell. So you have to ask for the sell. You should be seeding the sell in every single episode. You should be talking about, in this episode, I already talked about my membership. Bam. I already talked about a client story who got success with me that showed you that you can launch a podcast today and within a month, so your highest ticket thing. So I shifted what you thought about there. So you might have thought you couldn't sell your high ticket offer coming into this episode. And now you saw that it's true. And now you know that I sell a membership that's $10 a month, that the course is there and we can go deeper and you can learn more there, right? Like now you know that there's more behind the curtain. Now I've showed you that. So you need to be seeding your sell. You need to talk about your offers or your clients or both in every single episode you do. So you should be talking about your client, a client story, or talk about your offers. So, and specifically, so inside of my course, inside of my membership, so you're listening to this little taste about selling, but inside of my membership, there's a whole module that breaks down and teaches you how to set up your system, your sell system for your podcast. That's an example. If you weren't catching that, that's an example of like how to talk about your offer in your episodes, is like specifically show us what's behind the curtain, specifically show us what we're going to get when we work with you. So that's how you see talking about your offer. We want to specifically not just say, I have a membership. You want to say this, we're talking about selling. So let's talk about specifically how we help people with selling inside of our offers, right? So if we were talking about getting more sleep, then you could say, inside of my 6-week health program, in week 1, that's where we cover getting more sleep because it's the most important thing. And that's why we put it in week 1, because you can't get good fitness if you can't sleep. like that's just an example, right? But that's how you would do it. And then you're also going to talk about your clients. Why are you talking about your clients? Well, because one of the biggest traps that people fall in when it comes to podcasting is they just want to talk. And I love that for you. And I love it for me because I love to talk. I love sitting here right now as I am looking at myself in the room by myself, but I'm looking at myself in Zoom, talking to myself, full hand gestures, lipstick on, like ready to talk. I'm having a party with myself in here. But it's like, you need to talk. You need to show people that you're not just here to talk. You need to show people that this is not the inspiration, motivation podcast, that this chick who's speaking has a business. She has clients. Her clients have results. She has this program. This is what's inside. This is what it's like. And you do that through these little moments of, let me tell you about my client. So immediately it switches. We know this person has a business. We know this person, you're reminding us, hey, I have a business, I have clients, my clients get results. Hey, and it's a relevant example. And so that's what we're doing. We're just bringing up relevant examples. And so those are 2 ways in your episodes that you are going to be seeding yourselves in every single episode. The other thing that you're going to do in your podcast is you're going to have a call to action. You're going to have a freaking commercial and you're going to put it in the beginning of your podcast, in the first 25% of your podcast. There's not a sponsor alive who will come and sponsor your show and put their commercial in the back of your fucking podcast and pay money for that. Why? Because the most valuable real estate is in your first 25% of your podcast, because people haven't fallen off. People are listening. The majority of people will listen to your first 25%. So you want to put your call to action there. Who cares if you break up the episode and you don't want to break it up to sound salesy? Do you want to sell, or do you just not want to sound salesy? Like, which one is it? Like, do you want to sell some shit? I'm not offended at all when people sell me shit. I'm like, go girl, like, happy for you. Sell me shit. So put your shit in your first 25% of your episode, have your commercial in there. Talk about the result. I like to have commercials that are like, hey, if you're listening to this and you are ready to start a podcast that helps you grow your business and you want to sell your offers, go to podcastthatpays.com. That's podcastthatpays.com. I want you to talk about the result people are going to get, not just your program. And right now, I believe my commercial is going to my program and talking about my program, but I'm also testing that because that'll lead me to my next point, which is you need to have a system. You need to know what you are doing, and then you need to track it. So I know exactly how many people are going to listen to this episode and take action on the commercial. I know exactly how many people will listen to this episode, go to the landing page, podcastthatpays.com, and do nothing. I know exactly how many people who will go to that landing page and then purchase the membership from there. I know. So I can see that. That's important for you to know. You need to know what is happening. You need to know what content is converting the most for you. You need to know what people are doing when they're coming to the landing page that you're sending them to. You need to test your commercials, see which ones are being more effective. Test your offer that you put at the end for people. See what's being more effective. Maybe your people do need an extra step. Maybe you do need to send them to a free thing. God, Lord, please help us. This sending them a free thing from a free thing is just, I'm rolling my eyes so hard. But maybe you do. Maybe you need to send them to a call with you. Maybe it's they do an application and you can get on the phone with them. Maybe it is. Who knows? But I can't tell you. I can tell you what we can try. I can't give you a set formula for your business because everybody's business is different. Everybody's audience is different. It's all different. I can give you ideas and things that have worked and things that do work for me. And I'm going to give you the nuance. I'm going to say that you have to, which that's my last point, is you have to track it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have a system. We talked about this in a workshop today that I was doing. Like, write down a system, write down the things that you are wanting to track. So every month, maybe you're writing down how many people actually took action from your podcast. Is that growing? Are they taking action? And then what's your conversion rate? Are they actually leaving your podcast, going to your landing page, but are they converting? And if they're not, maybe it's not the right offer. Maybe your landing page sucks. Like, maybe, who knows? But if they're not taking any action at all, if they're not even leaving your podcast and going to this landing page, then we know maybe it's the content positioning that's off. Maybe your commercial is off, but we won't know until we track and then tweak. So right now I'm testing my commercial that talks about my membership straight up instead of just the result. This is my first time that I've ever done that. And you have to test things for a longer period of time on podcasting, like 3 months. So we shall see, right? We shall see at the end if that's something that's being more effective. And then we will tweak and figure it out. Right? And then I can come back here and talk to you and give you more results, give you more ideas and more things that are working or not working. So those are the things that it takes to really sell and convert from your podcast. So great content and positioning. Make sure you are positioned correctly and put yourself in front of the people who need to buy the things that you're selling. Make sure you're setting up a system so that you can track it and that you can tweak it. Make sure you're putting the right offer in front of people and make sure you are asking for the sell, period. And if you want to go deeper, I'm going to ask you, go sign up for my membership, podcastthatpays.com. We have coaching calls every month. We have co-working every month. You can ask me anything inside the group. I give special discounts, call offers, things that I don't do outside of the group, like members only things, members only. I'm going to get some members only jackets. But anyway, ask for the sell. That was an example of telling you to come to the membership. asking for this out. All right. So just make sure that you do that. And then I will catch you in the next episode where we're going to talk about really incorporating marketing, incorporating this podcast into your overall marketing and how to do that and why that's so important and how that's going to help you be more effective. And I think that's the last piece that we have in making, I think, don't even quote me on this. Never mind. Backtrack. I'm not going to delete that, but backtrack it out of your head. I have no idea what's coming next. We'll see. Just be pleasantly surprised. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, if you enjoyed this, come over to my podcast, come over to my Instagram at Angie M. Jordan and holla at me. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, head over to podcastthatpays.com to get started on your way to creating a podcast that pays. And don't forget to follow this show and take a screenshot that you were listening and tag me on Instagram at Angie M. Jordan. I'd love to meet you and show you some love over there. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. Let's get this money.